Autoline Daily is brought to you by Siemens PLM Software, transforming the process of innovation.
Here are today's top headlines. GM and Chrysler are good to go with the money they're getting. Mercedes gets slammed with fuel economy fines, and Honda takes an axe to some future product plans. Up next, we'll be back with the news behind the headlines. This is Autoline Daily for Wednesday, January 7, 2009, and now the news. Reuters is reporting that GM says the bridge loan money it's getting will cover all contingencies, even its worst-case scenario. Automotive News reports that UAW President Ron Gettelfinger says Chrysler will probably not need additional money either. What they're referring to is that $17.4 billion that the Bush administration approved for both companies. Now, they've only got a partial down payment on that money. They still have to show up with restructuring plans to get the rest of it, and they'll still be filing for that retooling money to build green cars. Amazingly, even though it's getting taxpayer money to stay in business, Chrysler is not going to publicly divulge any of its financial information. The Detroit Free Press reports Chrysler will have to file bi-weekly financial statements to the Treasury Department, but there's no indication if Treasury will share that info publicly. Cerberus, which owns Chrysler, says it will share that information with its private investors. And I'm sure we're all going to sleep more soundly knowing those billionaires know what's happening with our taxpayer money. As part of its restructuring plans and bowing to realities in the marketplace, GM is canceling plans to build the Pontiac G8 ST Sport truck, according to Autoline. But it's not just GM and it's not just the G8. Honda's canceling plans to make a V8. It's also canceling the next version of the S2000 sports car and a convertible version of the CRZ hybrid, says Autocar. Automakers are getting something of a reprieve in lower commodity prices, but the Australian Bureau of Agricultural and Resource Economics says they're going to start going up again in the second half of the year. And even though steel demand has decreased in the US, Japan, and Europe, the report predicts steel consumption will increase. The Freep reports that Mercedes-Benz got socked with a nearly $30 million fine for failing to meet federal fuel economy standards. And here is a perfect example of why Mercedes can't meet that standard. The company is paying tribute to British racing legend Stirling by naming a special edition of its SLR McLaren. The limited production McLaren SLR Stirling has a radically different body from the standard SLR. It has no windshield, no top, no side windows. It aims to give passengers a true open-air experience. For protection from the elements and gawking onlookers, you get a two-piece tonneau cover. There's a 650 horsepower supercharged V8 which hits 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds. Top speed is 217 miles an hour. Mercedes will only make 75 of these McLaren SLR Stirling editions with a price tag of only €750,000. That's a cool $1 million. The company should have one on display at the Detroit Auto Show, which opens to the press in just a few days. Coming up next, it's time for You Said It.
Siemens, transforming the process of innovation.
And now it's time for some of your feedback. This is You Said It. Every day we get all kinds of comments and questions from you, our viewers. You Said It gives me a chance to respond to some of them. Wendell Strong says, so what's the deal with Cerberus? They acquire huge parts of Chrysler and GMAC for all this money, and a year later they're both in the tank? What's your take on this whole thing? Well, Wendell, my take is that, like all outsiders, these guys at Cerberus had no idea what they were in for when they invested in the auto industry. Everyone on the outside thinks they're a lot smarter than those guys at the car companies, but now they're getting a real-world lesson in just how complicated this business is. Chris Burgess writes to ask, does it look like nominated Treasury Secretary Tim Geithner is going to be the new car czar? If it's true, how do you think he'll approach the job? Well, Chris, I got no clue if Geithner will be the car czar or who's going to get that job, but I can tell you whoever it is also going to get a front row lesson in just how complicated this business is. Greg Asseri asks, have any foreign transplants paid a single cent of taxes, or are they still on their original or renewed tax abatement status? My gut feeling is none have yet paid any taxes. Well, Greg, the new ones, no, they're probably still living off their abatements, but the older transplants are paying a lot in taxes. And finally, R. Rufty says, I see Cadillac will build the 2010 SRX in Mexico. Is Congress going to add a provision to the bailout money that cars and trucks must be built in the USA by American citizens? Well, that could happen, but you got to remember their plans to put the new SRX in Mexico was probably made 3 or 4 years ago, well before GM knew it would have to go to the government for help. And that's it for today's top news in the global automotive industry. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
Visit our website for even more great content all week long. Autoline Extra, Dawn's Journal, podcasts, and even more. So click over and get the inside view at AutolineDetroit.tv.